Okay, so for this is for quiz 2.03 for Algebra 2. Alright, so for this first question over here, it says, which is the graph of 2 times 4 raised to the x power? One thing that you can do is just to make a t-chart. So in other words, your y equals 2 times 4 raised to the x power. Make a t-chart, so a column for x and a column for y, and pick some x values. So you could pick 0, 1, -1 if you need to, and plug these x values in up here to see what you're going to get for y. So if I plug in 0 here, I'm going to get 4 raised to the 2 times 4 raised to the 0 power. Well, 4 to the 0 power is just 1, and 2 times 1 is 2. So that means that I should have the point 0, 2 on my graph. Well, this has 0, 4. Oh, that one has 0, 2. That could be a possibility. This one has 0, 1, and this one has 0, 1. So even just from that first value of x, you can already figure out that option B is your answer. But if you had a couple graphs that had the point 0, 2 on it, then just keep going. Plug in x equals 1 up here, you'd get 4 raised to the first power, which is 4. 4 times 2 is 8, so you'd have the point 1, 8 on your graph. And maybe the other option wouldn't have that and you could narrow your choices down. But if not, then you'd just keep going. Pick your x values, plug them in, find out what your y values are. Okay, for question 2 here, it says, what is the range of g of x equals 3 times 2 raised to the x power minus 1? Well, this value that's out here, the second term, so this is the first term, 3 times 2 to the x. This is the second term. That is your vertical or your horizontal asymptote. So we have a horizontal asymptote at y equals -1. So in other words, if you graphed that, you would go down to a y value of -1 and you'd put a dashed line all along there just to represent your asymptote. And you can actually do the same thing we did for question 1 and make a t-chart if you want to actually get more of a graph on here. But in general, because that value right here, the 3 that's in front of the exponential part of the equation, so your coefficient right here, since that's positive, you know that you're going to have a growth function, so it's going to be in that general shape, and it'll keep going up and up like that, and then just getting closer and closer to the asymptote the farther out you get here. Well, we're asked for the range, which is the y values. So if we look up and down, that's what you do when you're trying to find your range. We can see that there's not going to be any numbers down here because our graph's never going to cross this asymptote. So below -1, you're not going to have anything. Above -1 is where your graph is. And so that's where the answer here is all real numbers greater than -1. You can't say equal to -1 because the dashed line means that it's not actually going to touch -1. It can get really, 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 really close to it, but it can't touch it. Okay, question 3, what is the equation of the asymptote? Okay, so we kind of talked about that up here. If you look at this part of the graph, that's your first term, that's the exponential part, and then this part is, your second term, and that's what determines your asymptote. So because this is a +4, your asymptote's just at y equals +4. And just like up here, it was a -1, so my asymptote was -1. So you take the number and the sign to the left of it as part of your horizontal asymptote. Okay, question 4. Which transformations turn the graph of f of x equals 0.75 raised to the x power into the graph of f of x equals 0.5 raised to the x plus 4 minus 2? Okay, so this is just a matter of understanding what numbers added up here, how those affect the graph, and what this affects the graph. Well, if you have a number, that second term added out here, that is your horizontal asymptote, and so that will shift. Okay, so it looks like you had 2 units down, which is good. That's definitely going to shift it 2 units down. And then with the x value, anything, and this is true even if you get into pre-calc, hold on. So sorry about that. What I was saying is that any value that affects the x is always the opposite. So even though this is a positive 4, naturally we want to say 4 units to the right. But just if it affects the x value, remember it's just the opposite. So it's going to go 4 units to the left. So if it's a positive, it goes left. If it's a negative, it goes right. So I hope that helps. Let me know if you have questions.